there's a total disconnect now between the ruling group and the masses.
I hate psychology.
Clear out.
They're the same worm-like characters.
Analysts.
Fuck you with your stupid argument.
They should not bother us.
Democracy. All of this just works.
Vote for the generations who are coming.
Fully dynamic game engine.
A millennial video essayist.
All support, strength,
Constant craving.
and identity.
I haven't yearned. They are a disease of our time.
Clear them out. You're voting for what your grandfather and father fought for.
I sit and you.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist. I was running a bit late today. I barely sort of made it in time to set everything up. I've been putting up a lot of shelving and cutting shelves out of like oak wood to get stuff ready for baby things. You probably know how it is, Ludwig Path.
Yeah, I know. It took a lot of remodeling on my end as well, but you figure out some logistical solutions, and hopefully, like the wife is more involved in that stuff. That was the case for me. I didn't have to do that much thinking.
Oh no, she loves, the whole like interior design part of like rethinking how things can be, and then just telling me how she wanted, putting me to work, as it were. But it's interesting because when we bought the house, I can't remember how many years ago now, I barely, touched a hammer in my life, and now, I get to play with all these power tools. So it's been a fun journey in sort of remodeling.
Yeah, it's quite a liberating feeling, or it does add something, I think, to your life to be able to renovate your own house and have complete freedom over it. Of course, as soon as the baby comes, then that will be limited.
Sure, and that's why I'm, running around getting everything in order before that happens.
You should be getting in as much time as you can now, because when the baby is there, you don't have the energy or the spare time or something. You end up just outsourcing that stuff, at least for a certain period.
Nordan says the Longhouse is Longhouse. Well, you can call it Longhouse, and it probably is. But it's between me and my wife. It's a partnership, right? Like I do all the carpentry, and she does all the thinking about the colors. I don't have to do that. Right.
Yeah, I forgot we were Tate pilled. We're moving to Romania soon, so I can just have the woman live in some shed in the back and just raise the kids there. Of course, nice. That is the way to do it. But of course, now, so in the real world, if you're middle class, you have to make some concessions on these things. It's very unlikely.
I can't pay for like some guy to do everything. It's just too expensive here in Norway. So
it is, and of course, babysitters are expensive as well. That's the problem of living in a industrialized country. Is like getting service or just paying people for service that you really have to think carefully about it.
It's so expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, there are other countries, I think, say in the United States, for example, where that is a lot easier, much because of the high flow of immigration from Mexico and places like this, and because of that, they were able to delegate.
I remember going to a conference a couple of years back, and so this was like an international sort of style conference, but it was held in Norway. So there were a couple of speakers from various different countries, and when I don't know if you work in IT, maybe you've been in some of these like big tech conferences where there's like always talks going on, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you end up like, okay, well, I want to watch this talk at like 10 a.m. and then there's this guy who I'm really interested in what he's up to at like 12 a.m. But that half an hour in between, you kind of just end up at a talk just to kill time. And so that's what I did with a couple of friends from work, and we ended up at like a talk by an American woman. I can't remember her name. It was called something like hacking your work-life balance, right? And this was one of those talks where I realized quite quickly that she was basically just talking to the international audience that were going to watch the recording of that talk and not the room of Norwegians, because she was like, well, if you can't sort of get, if you don't have enough time for your kids, maybe you should just hire a gardener. Lady, do you know what country you're in? that's like half my salary. So it doesn't work quite that way. You can't get away with as much stuff as you can in the US. I remember when I went there the first time when I was younger, I was amazed at how they have people whose job it is to just open doors. Now, of course, this was in Manhattan, which is probably a bit more expensive place, but still, just in terms of raw economics, you need a lot of people for that to be viable.
Yeah, some of these jobs, like a door opener, elevator button pusher, and grocery store greeter, for example, those are actual jobs. You can get, I don't know, maybe they've cut down on it after COVID. I suspect there's not that many Walmart greeters or
packing your bags or whatever.
I mean, that's a little bit more practical, but the people who just say hi when you walk in Walmart or something, I mean, that is something else.
For a Nordic, someone's getting paid to annoy you, right?
It's quite amazing, but it does say something about the number of bodies that they have, or the amount of people that you can sort of throw at problems.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, we could talk about population this or immigration that. Like at least there is a clear advantage to that when you have that many people in the ways that you can specialize, and it frees you up to.
Yeah, no, I love having like
otherwise.
A proletariat I can step on. Right? It's that's great. Just grind their faces into the mud. I enjoy that.
Very aristocratic and
very
aristocratic.
Southern. And I'm sad that we don't get that in Norway. So
we'll take the benefits, and hopefully this, if Mr. Fink is correct, it'll lead to automation down the line through low immigration and xenophobia. the xenophobic automation bump. I mean, for those of you not familiar, what's his name there? Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, had this talk where it's been like video clipped and put into sound bites, where he's actually sounding like he's positively ethno-nationalist, which is weird because people associate him with diversion, equity, inclusion schemes and these things. But he said that he thinks that South Korea, Japan, and these countries with low fertility rate and high rates of xenophobia will be like the economic powerhouses because they'll figure out how to automate everything, and then they'll just be able to sit back and just enjoy the fruits of it.
Automate the racism, yeah.
Yeah, that could be a benefit as well. I'm not 100% convinced of it. It's just interesting to hear his takes on this, or generally getting these kind of like accidentally racist WEF takes, which I like. Being a Klaus Schwab fan, I just love these these videos where they just sort of clip.
It's like when you're listening to I think that's why a lot of the dissident right in Britain, of course, following AA, etc., are hyping up Tony Blair, is because when you listen to him, like a lot of his analysis is very much on point, and in a weird way, he's like fearless in the things that he's saying in terms of what needs to be done. Just give me the power, and I'll make sure this transition goes. It's going to be hell, but the transition is going to be as smooth as possible if you just let me do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is the European way of doing politics, and that's something we'll circle back to many times in this stream, I think, because
maybe
that's where the sensible centrist concept comes in very clearly in the lens of European politics, where that is kind of the return on investment of trying to be sensible centrist in Europe is very high, right? This is always what you want to do, is trying to position yourself as the least radical, most like the adult in the room in every situation. And that will always yield results in Europe. And there's very little room for anything else. But the way that, say, like the United States is different is that there's a big return on investment for being charismatic. And I don't mean charismatic as in that you're just likable or something. I mean in like the Max Weber sociological religious figure sense, that you're some kind of people think that you're like a magical person, or that you have some kind of like you're like John Smith of the Mormons or some religious leader. That people actually believe you're in touch with some type of higher power. I think Trump would be an example of that.
Mm-hmm.
That really, like, Trump needs to be understood as a religious figure ultimately, or like they said in the Dune movie, is that like you can't kill the religious figures because they just become stronger as martyrs. It just kind of drives the religious fever around them. So you have to have other technologies to handle that. And that's interesting interactions that you're seeing in how the kind of these sensible center types is going to interact with the charismatic politicians, and in that it doesn't work at all usually, and there's really no way for these two to communicate. But yeah, in Europe you have people who sort of have tried that angle, like they're trying to just run in with the full charisma, but it's just not there. Like the demand or people's willingness to listen to that stuff is
it can get you some of the way. The problem is that I don't know how it works in the EU, to be honest, like specifically for countries in the EU, because it seems to me whenever I talk to other Europeans, who they vote for EU Parliament, they like literally don't know who they are. But someone like a Trump or a Biden in the US presidency is so removed from people's daily lives that they can work as a religious figure without them ever having to impact their lives, right? If we vote for a different prime minister in Norway, it's not that far up, right, in terms of like degrees of separation. So it's quite easy for us to imagine that their choices will impact us, and when they don't, we get angry because we voted for them, right?
Yes.
So going purely on charisma works up until you have to deliver, and you have to deliver a lot quicker, apparently.
Yeah, they do expect a lot, but I mean, sometimes the delivery is also in the charisma, right? They elect charismatic presidents, so they just want them to keep being charismatic. It's always a big part of it. Like if you're running some type of appeasement scheme, rhetorical appeasement is huge. I think it's like the most important job you have as the president. You can get other people to handle the technocratic stuff, but you need to please certain constituents, like these various interest groups, and signal that you support them.
Right.
I mean, I used to kind of scoff at this stuff, like I don't understand why it's necessary. The older I get, I can kind of see why it's important to signal the right things, whether it be through getting people through tragedies or international conflicts or like whatever. It's just important for people to get a kind of sense of where the wind is flowing and what exactly is going on, and to have some type of guidance in these situations.
All right. We've been tangenting for like 15 minutes. Maybe we should get into the stuff we had planned this week. I am chugging like a liter of water because it's hot here. And hang on a moment. Florida man for $2 has said, "How did we go from gay bashing 80s to pride power?" It's a long journey, isn't it? And I'm sure if you just follow the money, you'll find the answer.
I think I did an episode of the Longhouse. It's like way back in our logs.
Oh, that's one of our first
on
ones,
particular like the journey from zero to hero of the Pride movement in Norway and then in Europe at large, and sort of how it went. And of course, the gay bashing in the 80s was a bit out of the norm, considering like the AIDS epidemic. That really just put a giant break on the entire movement, because they already had steam going into the 60s and the 70s with pushing through legislation, organizing. But like when AIDS came around, that was like their COVID or something. All of that stuff was just off the table, right? People just doing AIDS jokes, and if you were openly gay, people didn't want to talk to you or anything like this. So I mean, luckily for them, they were able to actually find cures to do something, and they could continue. But if that hadn't happened, I think that would have been the stop to it, actually.
Probably, yeah.
And I think that's sort of underrated. Like one of the reasons why people feel like the 80s were right-coded or more right-wing oriented is because of AIDS. and
yeah, that was a big sort of real fear, it seems. talking to older people, right?
Well, it's easily forgotten. I think people find it distasteful, but you can hear Trump quote. He was talking about like the 80s were my Vietnam or something because he was sleeping with models and he was afraid of getting AIDS. But I mean, but you know, they find it distasteful now, but it was very real at the time. I mean, if you've read the American Psycho book, that comes back quite a bit. They cut most of that stuff from the movie, by the way, because we were in the 2000s and they needed to change the characters to be a little bit more likable. But a lot of the dialogue is just about AIDS and using the N-word and like various. I mean, there's a lot of that stuff going in there. It just wouldn't fly. People would find it distasteful, even if they were, let's just say, slightly spicier. I find it annoying, to be honest. So, yeah, just that. But maybe we should look at something, you know, what's going on right now, because there's been some developments in good old Norway on the
Yeah, we're
Pride
going
front.
to cover actually it's a debate that's been going quite a lot for quite some time in Norway now, considering, I mean, we usually have short what do you say, news cycles or debate cycles, but this one's been sort of like going on in the background for like a month. And it actually starts a year ago, before or during Pride last year. And some listeners to the Longhouse might recall, I think we covered this, which was vandalism of Pride Street in the city in Norway with, what was it? We covered it. It has like the most amount of immigrants per capita or something like that.
Well, if
It
it's
was
a
in the news.
Drammen, yeah, it's very
Yes.
very heavily Muslim. I transit through there sometimes, and you know, if you go to the train station, you can see it clearly. Very brown.
Yes, we covered it because there was like a thing about a local party like wanting to say no to more immigration a while ago, and that made the news. Now, last year, so this is from 2023, the Pride Street in Drammen was vandalized by young people who allegedly shouted "Haram, Haram" while they vandalized the rainbow colors, likely on scooters or something. Looking at the skid marks,
Yeah, I think so.
it's probably those electric scooters or something like it. The young people are also said to have threatened witnesses who filmed the vandalism to delete their recordings, according to the police, blah, blah, blah. And then that made sort of the whole, you know, the rounds, something about them, you know, yelling haram and all that. And all the usual suspects sort of did their thing. And then also last year, one moment, a pride flag was torn down on a school in the same district, and I seem to remember reading that, yeah, while events were going on, the students are said to have shouted that the pride flagging is haram. Other Muslim students are said to have been kept home from school in protest against the pride celebrations at the school. So that was the thing that happened last year, both of these things, and other places as well. And it seems to have increased a bit this year. There's the I just have to, like, the you know, the meme of like, I won't step on the gay stairs, like the would you walk under the gay gate, like that, the rainbow
What happens if
gate.
we kissed under the gay gates?
Yeah. It's the weirdest things become sort of like the rainbow X, right? But the rainbow gate was painted over at a primary school. Now this is this year, a couple of days ago. Now this is just vandalism. There's no sort of pointers as to who or what or why. It's just pure vandalism. Probably, you know, some of those pesky Christians out in force painting over the just part of the. Did they run out of paint or something?
I don't know. I think if you had some kind of spray painter, it would be pretty quick.
More effective.
And I mean, if it's an elementary or junior high school, there's a very low threshold, I think, for kids to do stuff like this. If they feel like they can be a little bit edgy and just paint over something, it's easy to do, and you might get away with it. And it takes a lot more. It's a lot more work to, let's say, build up or paint an entire rainbow than it is to just paint it black over again. And it's low effort. You could sort of drag these things out, and I mean, the question is always like, with these kind of stuff, how much are they going to continue to do it if you're dealing with a population that is hostile to that level, right? And this is like, say, especially if you have like these Arab populations that are completely uninterested in participating in it. I mean, I talked to a colleague once in an Arab colleague that was from Iran, and he said that, I mean, certain parts of Iran where they try to implement stuff like toll roads and other things, it just doesn't work because the local population is not interested in it. I mean, it wasn't something ideological. It's like if they just put the toll road there, they just tear it down. If they put up a camera, it's just going to be removed. Like anything,
someone's just going to climb up and dismantle it. Yeah,
they're not. At least the least bit interested. So it's a bit like kicking water uphill at some point. Like, you're just, what are you even doing it for? You know, they're just going to keep taking it down, and you might have to, okay, you can put security guards there, but then it's just the optics of that is terrible.
Yes.
So there is something to like populism in this sense, to not to the point that you can get a lot of leverage out of populism, but if you have populations that are just kind of hard set against certain cultural narratives or cultural change in specific directions, and you need at least partially their consent, then they can throw enough sand in the machine to not have that happen. They can basically stop any movements. They can't direct the machine, but they can stop it effectively. And it's something that seems weird, especially if you are in an industrialized country, because it requires such a high level of consent to the governors and to the elites at all times, and not doing that is sort of seen as kind of low status. So the idea that like mass amounts of people are going to tear down buildings, monuments, it's a very foreign idea, I think, with pros and cons. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, what I think about whether or not you can sort of judo style use that energy, you mean?
Well, I mean, yeah, the value of populism, at least on the level of just simply resisting, especially when it comes to like more physical changes in your environment. You know, at what point, how much do you think you could actually rile up people to do something about this? Because it's
I don't know. It would be, well, that's the thing. Like, how much can you specifically rile up people? Because what I see engage people around me is, as you said, it's toll roads. It's not all of this other stuff, right? Before it's quote unquote too late, right? It's what people care about is, you know, it's the toll roads that they pay because they have to get to, you know, the shopping centers and pick stuff from the trough. Honestly, like that's what really engages people for some reason. I mean, I understand it because it's a very direct impact on your everyday cost of living. Like, I understand why people get upset. It's just that it's like that's like the final nail in the coffin you're getting upset at, right?
Well, I also understand why they're getting upset at it, and the problem with that is that you know, they did organize. The problem is that they just couldn't do it. They made this sort of anti-toll road party, and it just collapsed. Really due to just, you could say they were outmaneuvered. They didn't have what it took, like beyond a common hatred for toll roads. There was just nothing there to get them through to the end.
So you would have to rile them up on something else. Like, what if you get people? If you rile them up against the toll roads, and then, you know, you tear down one of those like toll gates, right? What's the next move? It's kind of like the to extrapolate this very far, it's kind of like a January 6th thing, right? Like, what do you do once you're inside the Capitol? Apparently nothing, right?
Well, there are different things that can happen, and I think like the potential to make changes on that level is bigger with poorer countries. Just as
Obviously, yeah.
staging a military coup in some third world shithole it's a lot easier than doing
Of
it in
course. Yeah.
a modernized
that makes
country that
sense, of
is
course. Yeah.
it requires less to run the country. Like say that they have a low tax rate and very few government programs and stuff, so they only want to basically get rid of one government thing or something. Then of course you could do that, or you could just scare the your president out or something. This is something that does happen, but it's difficult. I think in
There's
very
also no
developed.
need in a country like Norway. I mean, we're so far from having those problems, right? Nordanel says we're used to a high trust society, and we're in general very content, and that's the thing. As long as people are generally content, you're not going to be able to use populism, right?
It's difficult, and there's also the problem of there's something that is just it's difficult to organize people who are disagreeable, and having a lot of people who are disagreeable in one party, it's very very hard. And so I think that the people who are, especially if you look at least first world countries that are more technocratic, there's a high degree of just kind of agreeability as a personal trait, and the sort of more pro-social attitudes. Like, I'm not saying that the politicians are all just like super nice or whatever, but it's very difficult to like the what's the Bowden quote, the herding cats, isn't that what he says?
Yeah.
And I mean, you're seeing that. I wanted to do a special at some point about some of these far right parties in Norway, because I know a guy who's followed the history of the Norway Democrats for a very long time, right? And that's this is a problem that they have, is that it's constant chaos inside of the party, and these small coups that keeps happening.
Yeah, they always keep
changes.
like tripping themselves up on infighting whenever they get to like a certain critical mass of membership or power. They sort of just like perform some kind of seppuku and end up back at like 1% of the votes, right?
Yeah, they build up some momentum. There's some internal stuff. They get new leadership. This happens over and over again. They never seem to reach over, but this is what you get when there's not enough people who are agreeable inside of the party. And like the antisocial angle is also an issue there with the if you consider it low trust or something. I mean, you showed me this these Reddit these subreddits to make the contrast. I don't know if you want to tell that story, but I thought it was really funny.
So I've shown before on the Longhouse stream that there's a Reddit forum for Norway, which I use to sort of as a surrogate comment section for a lot of articles that don't have comment sections, will very often be posted somewhere there. So I can just type in Reddit and then like the title, and then I'll find basically a comment section to sort of get an insight in what like quote unquote regular people are writing about this. And what I did figure out apparently in that comment section is that there's been a split in the Norway subreddit. So there's like the quote unquote right wing Norway subreddit, and then there's the regular mainstream one. And basically the only difference is that one of them, the mainstream one, is a bit too pro-social, and the sort of right wing one, in air quotes, is just more antisocial, just more like, yeah, just leave me alone. I don't want to pay for anything, right? That's the difference between them. It's not even political. It's just kind of it's just kind of attitude difference.
Yeah, we talked about this in relation to the people who are cheating in the self-checkout lane, for example, or the sort of self-justifications that antisocial people have for doing particular behaviors, like let's say like stealing food, for example. There was this one guy in the comment section who said that I steal, there's certain food, because I have to do this checkout myself, then I'm losing service at the store, right? So I just take like a piece like a bread or something for free.
It's like a doing that
payment for doing this checkout service for myself. So like I had to pack my own bag and do the checkout. So I'll just take this as payment. I'll take this bunch of bananas for free as payment. And I mentioned, there are people who think like that, and it's just like so profoundly kind of antisocial way of thinking. But it's also quite funny.
I mentioned to you, my friend, a friend I was studying with had this like funny libertarian joke that, you know, I don't use turn signals because where I'm going is private information. It's the same. It's the same thing.
Yes.
It's like the same attitude. All right, we're getting way off track here. I need to get back on. Let's see here. So this year, a couple of schools, especially one school, but a lot of schools and some municipalities, etc., have shown in their sort of bureaucracy some hesitation to flying pride flags during celebrations, and it's specifically flying the pride flag. We're not talking not doing pride celebrations or pride, what you call it, like marking or any sort of like education related to it. It's mostly just not flying the flag. And this, sorry, did you want to say something?
You can keep going. I'll jump in later.
Sure. So what it's saying is, a quote here: "The schools must be for all students, and work is done on inclusion and diversity every day throughout the year. The municipal director has, at the request of several people, decided that flags will not be flown at the school in Ålesund during Pride this year." And they've also been challenged directly on whether or not, you know, is this because of backlash against Pride from, you know, the haram section of the population last year. And of course, they're saying it's part of it, but that's not the deciding factor. So we're getting into a weird situation here where we're all sort of like, there were this like public debate program where everyone is like tiptoeing around around all of this, trying to not step on any landmines, meanwhile trying to redefine what pride means to them, and what the flag means, etc., etc., which is very frustrating because it feels like they were all just sort of talking past each other. Now, what this sort of filters out into is a bit of an internal struggle in the school to a certain extent. The bureaucracy largely is for sort of going through with the pride stuff, but there are some teachers on an individual level who are going against this. So this is a opinion piece backed by 56 teachers. That's not a lot of teachers. This is a minority who are signing this this post here, saying that basically what's interesting here is that, okay, so I'm just going to read this for a moment. Do teachers have to accept that the pride flag should only be understood and defined in one way? What about room to be able to express oneself critically? Teachers are required to have an understanding of the pride flag. This is clearly shown in Erna Solberg's, our previous prime minister's, statements in connections with the rainbow quarrel at the Drammen school. This is one of the schools who ended up not wanting to flag for pride. Solberg believes that the flag is being misinterpreted, and at the Trettebergstuen claims on NRK state channels that the flag is not political. The case is dividing parents, pupils, teachers, and school leaders. According to Solberg, the flag symbolizes respect, tolerance, and love between all and should not be connected to burning and free. Now, one moment before we just, this is a bit low-hanging fruit, but this, we've talked about this before, which is the sort of the top NGO for, I guess, queer activity, to put it, or it's for gender and sexuality diversity, I guess is the translation. Of course, they are using the rainbow flag for one, in order to literally, I'm not sure if I have time to do this, influence the schools and the Directorate of Education in what they are supposed to teach the kids. Now, it's not incredibly radical. I haven't found any cases of, you know, the drag queen story hour stuff that we hear from the US, or, you know, teaching 4-year-olds how to use dildos or whatever. But we're still talking, teaching young kids about things that are incredibly radical in an academic sense, things that are still being heavily debated, are being presented to children as settled fact when it comes to, the gender debate as a whole. And that's sort of like the technocratic angle that this whole debate is centered around. The NGO is saying we don't have anything to do with this. The director of education is saying that actually the school has a lot to do with this, and every year we give money to free to teach us on how to do it. And some teachers saying, well, but your flag means that you want to diddle kids, and everyone else saying no, but the flag just means that we love people, right? So it's incredibly it's incredibly messy, and it's incredibly tiresome because no one wants to take a proper stand. And they even carted out on the debate show, they carted out like a gay Muslims against pride, which is we're getting into really like weird sort of I don't know what kind of Monty Python-esque comedy, right?
Very esoteric stuff. You don't know the lore yet. No, but I mean, sort of as a comment to this school had a mandate to choose whether or not they would use the flag. Not every municipality has that. The big thing is that they actually used it to not flag, and so there's still been no question as to revoke their right. They're still going to be able to not do this, even though there's some changes. And it seems like it's not a big deal, but when something like this happens, it sets the precedent for other people to do it later.
Yes.
I mean, if it goes unpunished, as they say, then yeah, other people will follow this example. There were cases last year as well with I think Thon Hotel, some of the franchises of that removed the flag, and so I mean, these are L's for the gay lobby. In terms of people are just sort of voluntarily, okay, maybe it's frowned upon, maybe they'll get some bad press, but they're willing to take it in order to kind of just push this stuff back or push it out from, they don't want to actually actively engage with it. You can say, okay, the curriculum still says that we have to talk about this stuff. We're not going to fly the flag. We're not going to use this. It'll kind of just
the bureaucracy at a certain level. We're talking like the administrative bureaucracy, right? We're not talking about the director of education. We're talking about like the school administrators are sort of like washing their hands of this and saying we don't want to deal with it because in the day-to-day operations, threading the needle between pride and Islam is too difficult, right? But meanwhile, of course, just today, the director of the Directorate of Education actually made a column piece where he is arguing in favor of this. He's saying Norwegian schools are built on fundamental values such as inclusion, respect for human dignity, equality, equity, I guess is the word we're looking for. Highlighting pride to teach children and young people about this is completely in line with the school's purpose. Pride is more than colorful parades and parties. Highlighting pride can have a great significance for children and young people's experience of belonging and being accepted. All children and young people should experience being part of a community in nursery school and in primary school. It is especially important for those who do not feel quite like the others, for the girl who wishes every day that she fell in love with a boy. What? Or he who feels more and more wrong after slurs and insults in the schoolyard. The school's work for equality and the right to be themselves can be vital for these students. Homo is still a swear word in the schoolyard. Research shows that queer youth are particularly vulnerable to bullying and other offenses. Pride is a celebration that can make children and young people aware that diversity and the right to be yourself cannot be taken for granted. So it's very boilerplate stuff, to be honest. But what's interesting is that this is on I want to say on the top levels of the bureaucracy, because this guy's not a politician. This guy is in the bureaucracy. He's not in the policy the Department of Education. So what the technical sort of flow of information here is that the Department of Education makes the policy decisions, while the Directorate of Education sort of makes the actual plan and actually implements the policies that the department decides. So this guy is not an elected official in any capacity, and he is politically, in that sense, all for including Pride and its sort of natural progressions through the organization Free into Norwegian schools. And you can see this quite clearly if you go to their websites. They include packets from Pride or similar organizations. All of these organizations need to declare their funding, of which this department is on all of them. Like, all of these organizations are receiving money from the state in order to teach the state about how to teach the kids to be gay, essentially. That's a bit harsh, but to include these things in the education. So it's a real like mush. It's a swamp, to be honest. It's a swamp that needs to be drained, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the gay episode that I did on this, they were able to push this in through research, right, and really through science. That it's really sort of research about gay people and about the nature of what it means to be queer that was able to kind of change this internally, as well as savvy lobbying and political pressuring, and getting this into the area where it's sort of what you consider a non-political issue, right? And this is something that I mean, I'm thinking about it more and more, not just because of the gay pride stuff, but in general, when you look at different countries and you try to figure out who's left or who's right, or part of the reason why it's confusing is that it's not always clear what issues are non-political and what issues are political, and how that will change in the future. So even in like the general right wing or the e-right as well, there's like this sort of push-pull here where people are unhappy that they can't change stuff like this, right? They want to, okay, I want to have less tax and I want to have more freedom of speech, more private property and so on. But a lot of these things are just inside of the non-political. And on the other hand, they will sort of complain about chaos, for example, and that they want as a kind of Caesar figure. But the Caesar figure means that basically everything is non-political in that sense. Like the dictator locks in every single issue. There's nothing that you're going to have any agency or participation in whatsoever. There's no point in being a culture warrior if you're living in sort of an absolutely totalitarian system. So, I mean, it's a very difficult balancing act, but that's where the debate is going on, is that people are trying to nudge this out of the non-political arena into the political, or at least take the parts of the pride that is more, let's say, saliently political out of it. It's just going to strip it down into bare essentials. That's what I see there.
Yeah, if they can take the teeth out of the Pride movement and go back to, well, the Fresh Prince version of it, then it would be fine.
Yeah.
Like if it's just if we can just get back to the gay men in suits just quietly walking down the street, then everything will be nice, right?
Yeah, because the momentum behind the gay movement is very limited now. They're not, the way I'm seeing it, they're not making gains. They might be making gains legally, but culturally, they seem to be losing a lot of ground. And the attacks on these gay clubs, like by the Muslim shooter last year, has not made any difference. Like, I mean, we talked about the charisma and the creating martyrs and so on. Even though people died, it has not really changed the momentum at all. It's something that's very particular, I think, about Norway and maybe the West in general, is that things have a certain political momentum, and then you'll have a dramatic events like bombings or terror attacks, shootings, but it really doesn't seem to slow the momentum down on a longer time scale. I mean, let's say like 9/11 didn't make America permanently hostile to Muslims. It was sort of like it flared up, and then people gradually moved towards being more tolerant of Muslims until you had like Barack Obama in the White House. I mean, he's not a Muslim, but he's Muslim coded in many ways, in a way that would not have been tolerated before. And I've seen the same thing, like with say the Labour Party in Norway. They've sort of descended quite a bit and ceded a lot of ground in spite of the Utøya attacks, right? The Anders Behring Breivik shootings. Is that you'd think that this would give them more sympathy and they could play on that, but it doesn't seem to work. They keep just falling in the polls.
In a sense, they did play on that quite a lot, right? And not in a, I'm not accusing them of it. They did it in a tasteful way, but it just didn't work, right?
Yes, and the same thing like with there's many other things, but the gay movement now, they've had this attack against them. It didn't really change people's opinions a whole lot. Nobody went to march or something. It didn't. They got no wind in the sails for it, right? And they've taken a lot of other, let's say, like optics losses. I mean, we talked about Espen Pirelli, who has had his medical license removed. Not able to do to give kids hormones anymore because he was just not finding the correct paperwork, and he was accused of sort of like malpractice from a medical perspective. Yeah. And then you had, I mean, recently this episode with the eunuch maker, which is something I didn't want to cover that much because I just found it disgusting. But they had a guy who is a Norwegian citizen who had moved to the UK, who was basically running this kind of like eunuch circle. Which it's like the I don't want to go too much into detail, but it's really sort of like a kind of like torture and dismemberment fetish cult, essentially, where he was charging money for those types of services and distributing material films. And he was like in one of the leading positions in the districts for this like free lobby, right? So to have people like that associated with you, it's just horrible optics. There's been more and more people who have sort of been associated with the organization Free, whether it's pedophilia or some kind of like crazier fetishes, medical malpractice, and they keep racking up these L's, and it's becoming less taboo to talk about it, and it's seen as sort of like less like you're punching down to sit and talk about this stuff. So it's very difficult for me to see that they're going to be making, okay, where do they go from here? What can they do now to gain more trust? Because people, especially after the lockdowns, a lot of people got into more what you can consider the sort of conspiracy sphere or conspiracy mindset. And I don't just mean that they're into QAnon stuff, but general suspicion of authority, general suspicion of things, where they're going to be asking a lot more questions and very quickly going to dark places when they look at movements like this, not looking at it through this kind of blue-eyed, high trust lens anymore. So they will have to be able to justify themselves in a different way than just using technocratic language, and I don't think they're even equipped for it. They seem completely unable to argue their case from a like a kind of political standpoint, just saying that this is what we stand for, and this is the value proposition of what we have to bring. It just goes back to like, well, we're all about tolerance, and you've misunderstood the point. Where it's like, no, people haven't misunderstood it. Yeah.
It's this, you get this weird thing where like the counter jihad people are pushing to be more inclusive than the Muslims they're opposing, right? So this debate sort of just turns everything a bit on its head.
Well, yeah, I mean, this has always been back and forth.
Well, not really, but yes, yeah. Sorry, it's not turning it on its head. It's just supercharging it, I guess. Is what I'm trying to get at. Because it's just annoying me because I feel like there's just nothing real coming out of the argument, right? As you said, because it's a purely technocratic or technical discussion almost, instead of real political parties being like, this is what we're for, this is what we're against. If you disagree with us, you're gay, right? in the stupid sense, right? Like, get out, right? If this is what we're for. If you don't like it, you can vote for someone else. But you have to create the uni-party, right? So you have to sort of weasel yourself into agreeing with what already is the zeitgeist, right?
Yes. So, I mean, from an organizational perspective, I think they're also kind of past their prime. They've lost some of their firebrands, and the most effective organizers. They still have like a distributed organization that is, what do you consider, bipartisan or something. They have like units that go across everything, but I don't know how much more energy that this movement can draw out. I think they will just kind of slowly get kicked backwards for multiple reasons, whether it's demographics or their lack of ability to justify themselves. But maybe we could look more at the kind
Except
of
for the homosexual men,
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
apparently have a stranglehold on Norwegian politics.
Oh well, yeah, that's true. Of course, that's not going to go away. The LGB stuff will not go, or this kind of like gay stuff. It's not going to be retracted. But I think a lot of the goofier stuff, the Qs and the Hs, no, the Qs and the Ts, and some of the more kind of kooky LGBTQ stuff, that is will get cut off. But
Most definitely.
yeah, I mean, we need to look closer into the kind of the rectal network, as Runesman calls it on Twitter. But we've been going for a while, so I thought we could sort of segue into some other topics. So you were talking about the weird split that you have between the racist liberals and the I don't know what you call the tradcons.
Sure.
On this issue, because we're getting into more of that territory. I mean, recently there was a what you consider a counter jihad protest in Manheim, Germany. Which
we're getting into this. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Which is something that I wanted to cover here, because I mean, I had what I'd consider like almost like a black pilling seance on Twitter, seeing how this unfolded. I talked a lot last episode about narratives. Now, of course, I'd wanted to continue doing this, if we get time this episode, to finish up a little bit around some of these Russian narratives. But first, talking about how I saw this, a lot of the memes that were created around this Manheim stuff, because it's. I was honestly a little bit shocked, but yeah, to give a quick summary then, there's a guy named Michael Sturzenberger, who is a part of an organization called the Pax Europa. That's like this German counter-jihad organization, and they have a rally, you had something like that in the UK as well with Tommy Robinson. So he's like a similar character, I think. I don't know if I assume there's some kind of overarching network to this. You've had this in Norway. You've had stuff like this in Denmark with what is his name again? The guy who burns the Quran. With the cap and everything.
Something.
Yeah, Rasmussen. It's that type of thing where they're having this protest, and of course the Muslims are coming out. There's a lot of agitation. The cops have to be there. So these things are always risky. This is something that happened last month, the 31st of May. And it ended with a mass stabbing incident, which is sort of, I mean, this is something that you don't want. This is kind of the worst case scenario, that there's going to be a shooting, a terror attack, or Rasmus Paludan. Yes, like that guy. It's that kind of event. And those events kicked off in Norway, I think in Denmark, with a lot of agitation, a lot of anger, but there was no killing, or there was just no escalation onto that level where people had to go to the hospital. At least not that was reported on, but this one kind of went off the rails. So the attacker, let's say Sauliman, I think Ati, was a German refugee, went after some of the speakers with a knife. So he was able to injure Michael Sturzenberger, who had to go to the hospital. He injured Heinrich Koch from the Alternative for Deutschland. 3 more people, and he was also able to stab police officer Reuven in the neck, right? And so the attacker was shot, had to go to the hospital, and the police officer died after 2 days in the hospital. These are sort of just the bare bones of kind of what happened there. The reason that it's,
like you said, German refugee. Do you mean like?
No, he's a refugee in Germany. He's not.
Okay.
I think he's
Theo
Iranian.
here says he's from Afghanistan. Okay.
Okay, we're good. We got the German patriots fact checking. So, like the initial reactions to this is that you're getting into this kind of tradcon versus counter jihad argument, the tradcon versus the racist liberal arguments on Twitter on the right. That is, okay, on one side, it's okay, now it happened again, right? The 0 days without another stabbing, and we have to do the remigration. We can't live with the Muslims, etc. But then you have like the other side that's more like the the third position is, which will point out that, of course, Pax Europa receives money from Zionists. They receive money from Israel, as do all of these things. Like if you go back to the model that I used last presentation with these kind of 3 concentric media circles, it's very much inside of the circle number 2 of the kosher media, the kosher organizations.
I see a lot of people reference to this guy in the chat as a golem, so I guess that's why.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So the memes are out there already. That's where the discussion is. If you have sympathy for him or not, or if you sort of see that what he's doing is destructive or what he's doing is helping. But that was a part of the. Let's see here. Iranian Christian immigrant.
Yeah, Theo Kerner says the cop who shot him is an Iranian Christian migrant. So this is just a mess for everyone. Really.
There's a lot of angles to this, right? I mean, of course, I was starting to follow this account on Twitter as well as a kind of German Muslim account. This organization they were quite agitated about this because the Muslim angle seems to be that these events are basically held to sort of bait Muslims into doing this kind of stuff, and when they bait them into doing it, then they can use
the poor
these
Muslims
attacks
are just not able to control themselves.
That's the point. That they fall into like righteous anger, and they get baited into doing this, and then they can sort of use that against them to further escalate and create policies to just have them removed. So that was sort of from their perspective, that's what's happening. And of course, I think that's important as well, because it's very easy to go into this kind of victim mode in these things and sort of think of yourself as the only victim in this. And I'm not trying to say that like the Muslims are the victim here, but from their perspective, it's like this is something that they don't like, because they feel like they're being put in a spot where they're constantly being made to do this stuff, when it would be better for them if they were able to go under the radar, so to say. But yeah, you had like the anti-Islam narrative versus the golem narrative, which is like, okay, you can have your opinions back and forth, how you feel about it. But there's like this third thing that seemed to come out of this, which was related to the way that this struggle panned out, that people had the impression that the police officer who got stabbed and died did so because he tackled the man who was trying to stop the knife man, right? It was a big scarfuffle. The stabber, like what you call the attacker, ended up rolling around on the floor with another man, and then a third person came in, like to try to attack them. It wasn't exactly clear. The interpretation of what happened is that the third person who came in a blue jacket was trying to disarm the knife man. He was trying to punch the knife man, and the cop took him off, because the cop is sort of like trained in this sort of anti-racist protocol where you have to sort of defend the Muslim. And because he did that, he left himself open to be stabbed in the neck by the Muslim attacker, and therefore he died. So there was like, that has sort of been the big story that's been shared on Twitter, that is sort of, he actually deserved it because he defended the attacker. Maybe I could try to share the screen so I could show people some of these memes that were being shared. See, I'm not that familiar with trying to do the screen sharing feature again. See if I can get the right one. Okay. I think I'm just going to share some of the memes first.
All right.
So people can see what I'm talking about here. This was like the Wojak edit. This is a narrative that's being pushed through this understanding of the event.
That's a really good Wojak. The power of the Wojaks is real. Like, I mean, even though you're building up to this narrative not being necessarily accurate, that is a really good Wojak.
But
He's doing
it's funny.
He's doing the George Floyd kneel on the Chudjak there.
So this is the Chudjak now. It's disappointed, who was just trying to stop the attacker, and then the policeman is doing the what is his name, the Derek Chauvin knee on his neck, and then so the Muslim stabs him, and then you have the Iranian Christian here shooting him. So we'll just look at some more of these captions, because there were so many of these that were made at the. This was like a sort of super spreader meme. this one here, like this is what happens when you help Islamists instead of helping those who fight them, right? So he put the so you have the Palestine flag
What is this
here.
guy even saying then?
Yeah, it's a little bit
You should support
confusing.
Israel? Is that what the meme is saying?
I'm a little bit
Israel.
confused by it, to be honest. So you have the Palestine here who's sort of stabbing, and then you have the UN flag, who's the UN should be against Palestine. I guess that was one take. You have one of these who did the like the race traitor one. I want to see it. It's not sure that all of these are up because the shelf life of Twitter is not that long, really. Let's see here. We have someone tweeting. Most people will consider this
You're
a bad
going
take.
to have to zoom in a little bit. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll see if I can. Is it better now?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is Van City Rick Rockwell saying most people will consider this a bad take, harsh and insensitive, but it is a necessary one. The police officer was a traitor to his people. He chose to attack his German brother, who was already under duress, rather than face the knife-wielding foreigner. He was a traitor in every sense of the word. There can be no sympathy for traitors. So hopefully others will learn. So quite harsh. Okay, let's see here. We have Wall Street Silver, another coal account.
Now this, he's talking about the Iranian Christian, as Theo Connor called him, right?
No. He's talking about the guy who
cop,
died.
Right?
Here you're seeing the cop who got stabbed. He's basically saying that this
but that's
cop
what Theo Connor said.
He said was
the
not.
Cop... Oh,
no.
sorry. The cop who shot him just off screen. Okay, sorry, my bad.
The cop, he did not shoot him. This guy died, basically putting this guy down. So here we have some arrows there and just basically explaining, it's supposed to explain content. There's a violent immigrant with a knife here. Cops subduing the innocent bystander, of course, and then pointing to a man who tried to subdue the violent immigrant. This is the meme that's sort of been going up. And the thing is that this is false. And I'll try to show you if the video is still up. There's a link to an actual video of what happened. We might have to watch it because it happens quickly, but I'm just going to show you here why the sort of meme understanding of this is entirely false. Okay, graphic content. I hope we can put this up without being stopped on YouTube. So get the full screen. People seeing now. I might have to pause. You're seeing my mouse as well, so that's pretty good. So I can just point to what's going on. Okay. So here they are on the ground, and you're seeing here's the guy in the blue. He's coming in, and he's starting to punch the guy over here. But you're going to quickly see that the guy he's punching in the head is not the attacker. He's punching the defender in the face. That's what's actually happening. We'll try to wait a little bit here. And okay, now you're seeing here. Now they've been separated. So here, the person lying here with on the ground with the guy with the blue jacket is not the guy who's lying to the right here. That is actually the guy with the knife. And here you're seeing the cop come a little bit on the left who is going to tackle the guy who is punching the defender.
Is there two cops there? No, there's one cop.
There's a lot of cops standing there. And
they're just rushing in. Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
So see, he is rushing in, and he's now putting him on the ground. You're seeing there. And so here you're seeing the guy with the red and the green. That's the stab. I think that's the guy with the knife. And the guy on the left is the defender on the ground that was being punched. So there, okay, then you're seeing it. The guy on the left here, he was the one who was being punched in the face. It was not this guy. So the guy in the blue actually came in and started attacking the guy who was already being attacked. The cop came in, put him on the ground, and then this happened. So he comes in and stabs the cop in the neck.
Yeah, we don't have to.
And then he gets shot.
Yeah. Just for YouTube's sake, we don't have to linger on that.
And look here. Look at this guy in the blue. Look what he's doing. He's going after the knife. He picks up the knife. He's sort of moving toward the cop, and then he drops the knife again. So I wasn't even sure. To me, it looked like the guy with the blue was actually trying to attack the same target as the attacker. I don't know why he sort of like went to grab the knife and sort of looked to the policeman. And it looks like he looked at the other guys and then he dropped it. But this is what actually happened. And so the cop did exactly what he was supposed to do. He defended the defender. Basically, he defended the victim, and he gave the other police officer a clean shot to take out the attacker. He shot him one time, and not he didn't just fill him with bullets. So, and he died in the process. Like he was, to me, it's actually sort of an honorable thing to do. He did exactly the right thing,
I'm
and he
not
showed
sure
a
if
lot
I
of
would go that
courage.
far, but sure, yeah. I mean, uh, I would say that it seems that he at least followed protocol, right?
He did, and but the narrative that's being pushed now is not. It's not the narrative of Muslims bad and we can't work, or the sort of the golem, these counter jihad Zionists are screwing everything up. It's really white German cops suck, and that is sort of been the winning narrative of this story, right? And I don't understand exactly how this is happening. I mean, part of it, I have really two theories: is that it's sort of troll factories that are pushing this extremely hard, or that is sort of the non-organic top-down explanation, because they want to push really the narrative, like I was talking about the last episode, of these kind of like foreign Russian troll farms that are really trying to focus on basically Russia awesome and the West sucks, and just having this narrative being about Western multiculturalism doesn't work and German police don't know what they're doing. Or essentially that the right wing on Twitter is just so internally demoralized and cucked that they prefer a version of reality that is sort of like where they are the victim in every situation. And even though there's video evidence to the contrary, they just want to push this narrative so hard. So
what I find annoying is that I understand where you're getting at. I just feel like there's something to be said for, even though the narrative is wrong, could it serve you, or do you feel like it's just... it doesn't sit right with me saying that everything went as it's supposed to here, because I feel like this situation shouldn't be happening in the first place. Right?
Well, I mean, okay, there's my take on this, right? People can sort of complain that, okay, this shouldn't have happened, or like you have these kind of like Monday morning quarterbacks in the comments who said that they should have shot the attacker earlier, which I don't know if they've ever used a gun, but how difficult it is when you have two people rolling on the ground like a dust ball and to get a clean shot, because there's other footage of it. And like, in my opinion, there was just no opportunity in the footage I saw to react and get a clean shot at the stabber at any point. But they seem to just kind of expect Dirty Harry stuff from the police, who essentially might not have been experienced with this type of situation. So I mean, like, the other interpretation would then basically be that this event shouldn't have happened at all, which is like, okay, then the German state would say that, okay, you want to have a counter jihad or an anti-Muslim protest. Well, you can't have it. You're not allowed. Okay,
well,
maybe you have.
I'd go
speech.
one
Well,
step
you
further,
can't,
right?
Yeah.
Like, I would like to hit the undo button 2 more times. Can we do that? Right, before we need a counter jihad, is that an option?
Yeah, so we shouldn't have never had immigration in the first place.
Well, not that kind, right? Is
But
that an option? I know that's very simple, but is that even an option
yeah,
here?
it's fine, but that's not the cops' responsibility. Like, the cops are not writing immigration policy.
And that's why I'm saying, yeah, he followed protocol. I'm not happy with what happened here, though.
So but anyway, like, my point is that instead of like we're doing the narrative Muslims are bad, or the kind of like counter jihadis are just sort of pushing are just trying to sell Zionism covertly through making Muslims angry. We're having the debate that the German police hate white men, and based on a lie, which is perpetuated by people like almost like every big influencer that I saw on Twitter. Like, some people like Martin Sellner had the integrity to actually correct it. Like, even Russia troll Ian Miles Chung was courteous enough to actually make a correction on this. But like chuds like Palmgren here or something, they just sort of kept going on with this narrative. And like, even with this narrative, they just sort of kept making more and more kind of rage bait through the
Yeah, I do agree. It went a bit overboard at some point, which is annoying, because then it sort of drowns in this weird, almost like cuck sort of weird pornography, where it's like, are you enjoying this, right? Are you enjoying posting about this? But I blame Twitter for that. I I don't know. I just feel sad for just for the situation, but also for the quote unquote movement. Then, like, where do we go from here if we can't if we can't do anything other than just sort of like impotently rage? Then
I'm just
like, what am
worried
I
that
doing here?
there's just a
Right?
big impulse of that on Twitter. People who are just very into this constant victim narrative that they almost they're just enjoying it a little bit too much. Not to be said for that, because like I said in the previous stream, I have like a large spreadsheet now where I've tried to document every sort of Russian shill account, and the majority of them were reposting this stuff. Right? I'm not saying it was just them, but this is something that, of course, you have multiple angles to repost this. But here we have one of these accounts just picking up from where I was on the last stream, where I wanted to cover more of the kind of ortho bro Russia shills on Twitter. So this account, Orthodox Canonist here, who he was first pushing this kind of false narrative. Here we have the clown emoji.
My feed has been like, you're reposting. Is this the guy you're reposting about like Orthodox churches in Africa?
Yeah, this is the guy. So, I mean, there is a certain what you'd consider a part of the Russian narrative messaging, because, like I said last stream, they have like a myriad of narratives. They have something for everyone, right? And this is more geared towards the kind of the superstitious crowd. Essentially, I think it's a lot closer to some of the stuff that people are getting internally inside of Russia, because I tried to look more into it. The internal Russian propaganda, I can at least tell you that it's not Ian Miles Chong. It's not the kind of nationalist ethno-state stuff. But you still have the Russian Orthodox Church pushing more of this kind of what I consider more of this kind of superstitious occult type of narratives, and we'll take a look more at those. But I just wanted to highlight this one, because this is how the meme saga goes on. It's not enough to misrepresent it, but they were doing this meme as well, where it's like the German officer, he was murdered by Islamist extremists, and then after that happened, then they had a memorial where they had an imam who was reading the Quran or something, and then here's the commentary, like, not sure if this is mockery or perhaps just a sign that Germany is ours. The conquest is complete, disturbing, reminiscent of the 9/11 mosque. Of course, this is also this kind of very selective rage baity representation of the stuff that was going on. They had a very large memorial service for this guy with about 8,000 participants, very much in sort of the style of the kind of regime peacemaking, fresh print stuff, where everybody's showing up with flowers, and they have music, and of course they have a priest talk, and they have like a rabbi talk, and an imam is going to talk there. So it was sort of like, okay, everybody's going to get together and condemn this attack. But because he read, like, one part of that was an imam reading from the Quran, and they took that clip out and then basically said this is ritual humiliation, right? So both he was sort of like killed by a Muslim because he was anti-white and a cuck, and then after he dies, then the whole funeral thing is just imams like doing chants or something. That's kind of the mass, like, the cucking doesn't stop. They just keep running harder and harder on this this kind of the West is cucked narrative.
Why does that never pour over into actual enough is enough? Is it just because the incentives aren't there, because they're making money off of Twitter posting this shit?
I think it's very the rage bait and the engagement bait is
that's what I mean. Is it just all Twitter's fault?
Part of it is I think some of these agents have an incentive to push that narrative. And there is, I've said it before, there is validity to people who are living in the West doing these critiques and trying to actually address these problems. But when you're talking about the actual foreign agents, these kind of like Putin worshippers who are pushing this narrative, you have to think about what they think is the alternative to this and what's actually going on in Russia, like the Russian ways to deal with this stuff, because Russia also has a high amount of Muslims living there, and they have a high amount of Muslim immigration as well, which of course leads to the same type of multicultural issues. And what's the solution for that? Well, you don't have these protests. That is like the Kaiser thing. This would just not be allowed in Russia at all. For people, there's this clip that was posted on Bricks, on Bricks News, where I don't have it right now because I can find it later.
Yeah.
Putin is like holding up the Quran and says that this is like the holy book, and nobody, on my watch, nobody's going to insult the Quran, right? So that basically means you're not going to have any Quran burnings. You're not going to do any of this stuff because it's going to upset the balance of Russian multiculturalism. So, I mean, you will get Muslim immigration, you will get open borders, and you're going to like it, and you're not going to do these counter-jihadist
in terms of like the
right?
quote-unquote multicultural project, right, that we're doing in the West, this way forward is more or less like becoming more undemocratic is kind of the way forward in order to avoid these problems, right?
Well, yeah, eventually, that is kind of the multicultural Caesar thing, is that, okay, these people are just you're not going to be allowed to voice criticism of Islam. That's just the final kind of stand on this. And I'm not really sure if like the people who are boosting this stuff and thinking that Putin is based, if this is what they want. Basically,
I'm
that
not, I'm not
we're just
saying that
get,
Russia's going to take over Norway but I'm just saying if you continue, if Germany continues down that path, eventually they're going to have to there's going to have to be the multicultural Caesar, as you said, who's just going to come in and say, all right, well, we're basically just establishing new ground rules, right? And that means we're going to have to take away some of your freedoms because this isn't working anymore, right?
It's quite possible, but if the sentiment goes the right way, say if you have like a larger election victories for Alternative for Deutschland, for example, it might turn the other way. There's been all these Ausländer Raus videos going around in Germany, like these kind of techno songs about getting foreigners out. So it seems
Either
like
way,
among young
we're heading
people
towards totalitarianism.
young people in Germany, the sentiment of remigration is very popular, right? And that might actually mean that they might push out some of the Muslims or try to curb their special exceptions that they have, right? So, I mean, for me, that would also be a much more desirable outcome. But
no Russian goes unnoticed by Ludwig, says Tomahawk. And Nordanon says, I imagine if Ludwig had a death note, there would be a bloodbath of Twitter Russia shields.
My Twitter timeline would just be so clean at that point. It's the TRD. But I mean, I'm going to look more at this account, like this Orthodox canonist, and the reason I picked him out is that he's very prolific. He's running the it's the World War Now. That's the podcast that he's running, and we could take a look at some of these narratives that are being pushed.
Are we beefing with another podcast?
We might. I didn't. This is more of like a research project thing for me.
Yeah.
Right?
No, go ahead.
I didn't want to do any WWE.
This is going to be great for engagement.
We can take a look at some of the type of content that's being posted by this account and who is retweeting it and why. So here we have one. Like, this is the typical stuff that's coming out of this account. Like, warning, British flag. Occultism continues to reside in London, the capital of the old money. King Charles is often associated with the heraldic symbol of the dragon due to his former position as the Prince of Wales, as per our recent conversation. And he's referring to the podcast. Right? The red dragon has been associated with Wales for centuries and features prominently the coat of arms of the Prince of Wales. 2024 is the year of the dragon. The Bible quite often refers to Satan as a dragon. The portrait is approximately 8.6 times 6 times 6.6.
This is
inches,
an edit, right? Like they've added the Satan stuff on it, or is it?
Are you sure?
I don't know.
Are you sure, Walrus? Are you sure this is an edit? I'm not,
yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. This isn't like, if you put it, like if you mirror it, then you can see Satan in the bread, right? It's this is a clear edit.
This is a very clear edit, but this is the type of content that's being posted on this channel constantly, right? Nick Griffin retweeted this, by the way, just to note who was following this. So there are big people in like the nationalist community and the far right community. As J.F. Gariepi retweets Orthodox canonist quite often, right? So when you have people who have like PhDs or sort of high positions that are retweeting this kind of like I saw Putin at a piece of toast nonsense, it gives it credibility. It really launders sort of these kind of like Russian narrative talking points. I mean, and of course, this is supposed to appeal more to the kind of conspiratorial people or the ortho bros who have taken on much more of this. What do you call it? Like a spiritual worldview,
militant view through the Christianity. Yeah, looking for the Satan symbols.
And a lot of the discussions is going on. If you look at the Ortho Twitter, it's a lot of this kind of thing that they're talking about and how they're processing the world. And this is just a very good angle to feed them Russian narratives. I think even Tucker has done a lot to normalize this kind of stuff, because if you've seen like a lot of the recent Tucker stuff, he's talking about the good and evil worldview, or the kind of spiritual war that's going on underneath, combined with all this kind of goofy alien stuff. That I mean, I had some discussions on Twitter as to where like Tucker's going with the alien stuff eventually. But like an angle that's possible to round off this alien arc is just to roll it up in the Russian propaganda and just say that the reason that United States is the only country that's being visited by aliens is because they're actually demons. And it's demons because the United States is satanic.
That's like full
right?
Alex Jones, isn't it?
Well, it is, but that's where Tucker Carlson is now. I think he's sort of a light cola zero version of Alex Jones at this point, where the United States is demonic and satanic, and then Russia is holy, and that's why they don't have aliens or whatever. I mean, I don't guarantee this. I just say that this is like a possible way that you could try to explain, or like, okay, I'm just trying to imagine why he's putting so much emphasis on this alien stuff all of a sudden, like outside of just his genuine interest in it. If people have some ideas in the comments, then yeah, please post.
So fucked up to me that he like. But I mean, that's where we are. Where like 1 week Tucker Carlson has like, for all his faults, Curtis Yarvin on, and the next week we're going to talk about how aliens secretly control the U.S. Right. Now, yeah, if we stretch the meaning of aliens, maybe you're onto something.
That's why I think so, because he's going with this kind of Russian Orthodox foreign policy worldview, right? Where the stuff that's going on in foreign policy is actually a battle between the demons and Jesus Christ, which is this is what they're selling here. They want to quote Russian foreign policy as being basically Russia ruled by God. That is their the slogan. So we have more. So I'm just going to show off a few tweets here.
I mean, this sounds. I'm not trying to push back. It just sounds incredibly online. Like, how effective is this really? Right.
Well, the thing is that this is not for you, right? The narrative is not. That's what you have to realize, that when you look at any other Russian narrative that's not tailored to you specifically, it looks totally retarded, and that's kind of why I wanted to show this. That's sort of my. It's kind of, you create 1,000 narratives that's meant to target these various groups, so that you always have a sort of story to explain why Russia is in the right on these issues. Just like with the right stuff people, they have the like Russia is secretly at war with Israel stuff, which also is sort of something I think is really stupid sounding, but they kind of think that Putin hates Zionists and he's going to arm anti-Zionist forces and destroy Israel or something, and that's why you should root for Russia, right? But it's effective enough to get those people on board. It's not. I think it's far-fetched. I think most people
suppose the goal in the end would just be chaos. It's not about coherent narratives. It's just about atomizing as many people as possible. Yeah, it's quantity over quality. That's the motto. That's what you always have to go back to. It's not like it's completely cynical. It's not one consistent thing that they believe in internally and they want to push outwards. Cynicism is key here, right? It's the same reason that they will promote leftist things like Black Lives Matter, for example, or Palestine. It's complete cynicism. They have no interest in actually having any kind of morally oriented foreign policy towards any of this. Where I mean, and that's another angle too that we're going back to, but it's sort of the idea of like big power politics, or sort of offensive realism in foreign policy, because that's also a part of like the Russian narratives that are being pushed, where morality is not important at all. It's really just all about like, well, big powers have to defend themselves, so it's sort of inevitable that they have to invade Ukraine. But I'm just going to, okay, you can do this, and then I'll ask my question.
Okay. I'm just going to read here. The sins of the Ukrainian regime have weakened the morale of their troops. As Kharkov front is crumbling, Russia will push with courage into occupied territory. They are prepared to face the enemy, be it Satanists, pagans, liberals.
Well, I mean, this is literally just propaganda.
Banderized. Oh, is it now? Yeah, well, you recognize it because you're not in the target group for this.
Yeah, okay, but see, that's the thing. Okay, let's say this is for Americans or something, right? what is the narratives that they're running against Europeans? Because just as, dangerous would be a unified Europe, right? Not just NATO, but EU, right?
Yeah,
Let's
I
say,
have
Napoleon Macron, for some reason, managed to put together an EU army. That's like the worst case scenario for Russia, right?
I mean, the anti-Macron narrative is like his wife is the tranny was sort of the one that was run out.
Does that stick in EU?
It doesn't stick very well, but that's the point. Is that this is throwing spaghetti on the wall and just hoping something works, and eventually it will. It has less ability to stick, but I have enough people in, at least on my timeline of Norwegians who are completely bought into this stuff. So the two angles that you have is either the Nazbol stuff, like they've sort of been able to court the far right into this. So the far right is buying into the idea that it's like they get everything they want except the race stuff from Russia, right? Because Russia is anti-Zionist. That's kind of the what they're running in Europe.
So
because
UNESCO saying there's an anti-Macron narrative. Macron is a complete. Yeah, he might be a clown, but he is working very hard to, at least in terms of his politics, he's pushing very hard for an EU army. My point is, from the point of view of Russia, that is a very bad situation to be in. They don't want that to happen.
Well, at
like
least from
a unified Europe is really bad for Russia, right?
From their foreign policy perspective, right? That's what they're running.
Yeah.
The anti-Zionism angle is one thing they're running, and it's the nuke angle as well. That's kind of what the accounts that I'm watching on Twitter right now in the Norwegian sphere, and you'll see me discuss with them from time to time. They're going into absolute fucking panic mode, screaming about nukes. And I'm not kidding. Like, they'll just write these long paragraphs about, what about your grandchildren, for example? That's just a meme that keeps going up. They keep talking about, what are you going to tell your grandchildren when Europe is nuked, right? Because you were on Twitter trying to egg on the NATO army to move in, or sort of it's really about the escalation bit now, where most of the NATO countries have given the green light for the weapons equipment that are being sent into Russia to actually shoot target inside of Russia, at least within certain boundaries. And they're basically saying that this is an invitation to pure nuclear war, and if you're consenting to this on Twitter, or you're trying to push this narrative, then you're complicit in the nuclear war. And your family is going to die, and like everything is going to die because you were pushing the funny anti-Russian memes or something. I mean, I'm not kidding. I don't have that many of the tweets saved, but this is
shared the wrong meme, son.
Yeah, this is the experience that they have, is that they first they were running like it's over basically. It's the Ukraine has lost already. Ukraine lost 2 weeks ago, and there's no point in doing this. And now they're running the sort of, okay, well, this is going to be a nuclear war if you don't back off. And everything you like is going to die, and you're completely irresponsible. And like after this stuff, there's going to be courts where you'll be judged for your tweets. Like it sounds absurd, but like these are the conversations that I'm having with these people. So I mean, in my view, the people who are going like full batshit panic mode about nukes in World War III, they just kind of swallowed that's the propaganda line for them to get them. I mean, I mean, we should be careful playing with fire in that sense, but I don't see why anyone would post that just non-stop on Twitter for no reason. Especially if you're going from gloating about Russia winning to doing this kind of concern trolling, right? Where it's I'm just so concerned about your well-being and the well-being of your children, when 2 weeks ago they were just kind of laughing at the people who were, you've wasted your time, and Russia's winning, and they're doing the Putin dance memes and stuff. And now they've gone on to basically, what about grandma and your kids? And it's strategic empathy, right? That's what's going on. Let's see, here's another funny one. Dual citizens. Yeah, they like to duel with each other. Right. Especially those with the Israeli heritage are not forcefully conscripted by the Ukrainian totalitarian government. They remain safe. They celebrate, quote-unquote, build and prepare their harvest. They believe that soon their time will come. And then you have the video there of the Jews dancing.
They're just doing the thing, yeah. It's the funny music.
Yeah, it's the clarinets, or I'm not sure what the blowing.
I think it's a
blowing instrument
clarinet. Well,
is.
it might
Yeah.
be. I think it's a clarinet, or it might be an oboe, depending on the song.
Yeah, it's but this guy is running two narratives at the same time. Usually, he's running the one narrative that the Jews don't have to fight in Ukraine and they're just cowards, fucking off to Israel. And at the same time, he's talking about like the right sector part of the Ukrainian army. That's like this kind of elite Jew base, this kind of like Nazi Jew Satanist
What?
stream here. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. That's kind of the. Let's see what else he has here.
While you're looking that up, and while we have everyone here, I want to put out the call to anyone listening to this who might be Scandinavian. Friend of the channel, Jay Green River, reached out to me, and he wanted to share a Discord channel if anyone is interested in meetups or cultural events a la basket weaving. And so if you are Scandinavian and you're listening to this and you want to meet some people in real life, in meet space, as it were, not necessarily politically or anything like that, just sort of hangouts, you can follow the link that I'm putting in the YouTube chat right now. That would be great. All right, Lydic.
Okay, yeah, we'll take a look at some other ones here, because he's I mean, we can sit and talk about like the Jewish influence. It's been commented on quite a bit, but this guy is like usually the Ortho bros are on another level with this stuff, to the point where everything they don't like about Russian history is because of Jews generally. He posts very often about Stalin being Jewish, for example, which is I guess it's a sort of double-edged sword, right? Because a lot of the, let's say, like the Russian supporters, like Nick Fuentes and people who are on the right wing, like Russia because of Stalin, right? They see him as like a very effective leader that was able to do big things. And even though it had painful consequences, this was sort of like one of the great things that actually came out of Russia. But within the Ortho spirits, it's kind of complete disowning of everything that had to do with the either Stalinist or communist movements, which is completely pushed aside to it's just all early life, and that has nothing to do with the Russian project. So I mean, even stuff that sort of Putin is doing directly, he will just blame on Russian Jews. So let's look at this one, for example. Popular Russian Czech Wikipedia early life rapper Timati has said that right-wing white Russians are trying to exaggerate this recent terrorist issue, that would be the Crocus attack, and make it about mass and illegal immigration. He then proceeds to call these bloodthirsty terrorists hired boys who did it for money. So much effort just to protect illegals from some mythical pogroms similar to the Bolshevik and anti-Russian propaganda in the 1920s, instead of focusing on the issue of Ukrainian intelligence operating and hiring these illegal aliens. So then he's talking about, these subversive Jewish rappers that are just kind of, destroying the Ukrainian intelligence narrative that he thinks is the correct one. So I guess some of the Russian propaganda is kind of stumbling.
I don't even understand what this is aimed against. Like, what is?
Well,
I'm having a hard time following the narratives here, just because they're so sort of convoluted at this point.
He's, I mean, you have this kind of standard Russian line where pretty much everything that goes wrong in Russia, it's either because of Ukraine or the CIA.
Yeah, I see that.
So
this is
you feel like
Jews protecting Ukrainian intelligence. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, it's almost like this kind of game with the counter jihadis, where it's like you're pushing the wrong target, and that's like the Jews inside of Russia are actually focusing on, multiculturalism or something, instead of focusing on the real enemy, that's Ukraine or the Anglo-Saxon menace.
Yeah, don't focus on multiculturalism, guys. It's great. It's going fine.
It's yeah. Of course, I'm just gonna post this one for fun because we need to laugh a little bit. And as a good Ortho, Africa is rising here.
Yeah, this is the one that I saw. I had to do like a double take. Like, why is this in my feed?
I didn't want to dunk. I just wanted to show people.
Just when Jay Burton has stopped like polluting my feed, then you start.
Yeah, it is the same thing. Like he doesn't like Jews, but he wants to get as many like African orthos into
Doesn't
Russia as
like
possible.
Dugin, doesn't like Dugin have like some weird pan-Russian African stuff
Yeah,
in his
I mean,
philosophies?
the Eurasianist idea is really kind of anti-Anglo and very much pro-black, pro-brown in its ultimate consequence. And that's sort of one of the other points that I wanted to talk about, like some of these other narratives that are being pushed over in our sphere. See, again, we're sort of running a little short on time, but maybe I'll continue in 2 hours, and I'll try to just cover some of this stuff so I can just be done with it. Okay, to finish off the like the sort of Christian angle to it, it's all fine and dandy when you can keep memeing about the satanic Jewish Ukrainians, but I mean, Russian Christian foreign policy is itself quite incoherent when you consider that some of their closest allies, like China is one of the biggest persecutors of Christians on the planet. I don't think it's even close. They have close to maybe 50 million Christians living there who are actively persecuted. I mean, you can look at this on like Christian websites that track this kind of stuff, or if you know Christians that are active internationally. It's one of the worst places to be for Christians, and Russia is not doing anything in China to try to make them back off this kind of stuff. They just sort of allow this to happen. Same thing with India. Christians are being persecuted. I mean, in a lot of these kind of BRICS adjacent spheres, that's what's happening. And like, there's zero effort there. It's like this completely. That's why I'm trying to say that like this Holy Russian Empire stuff, it's really just kind of a propaganda angle targeted at Americans mainly to get them to legitimize Russian foreign policy completely cynically. It has nothing to do with any kind of idealistic mission that they have. And like Putin himself is quite happy with Muslim immigration. So, you know, what exactly is he doing to try to maintain Christianity there over a long period of time? Not a lot outside of very superficial signaling. But I wanted to, move on from this. That there's this kind of a narrative that is going a bit on the intersection between the philosophical and the religious, more superstitious bit, and it's the kind of French Revolution narrative. The idea that basically since the French Revolution, because we went from the kind of the old world monarchies onto the constitution-based liberal systems, that the West has been just doomed to fail because of this, right? And this is something I didn't think much of because I've heard it so much. I've heard it from people like Oren McIntyre and Charles Haywood and so on. And it, of course, didn't strike me before Tucker Carlson had Dugin on his show that this is just a Duginist narrative, actually. You just need to replace the elite or something with the Anglo-Saxons, and then you have like a perfect representation of the part of this kind of Duginist ideology that the West is just going to fail dialectically because of liberalism or whatever. Like it just can't be put back in the bottle. Considering also how many of these American orthos that are promoting this type of worldview, I think it's quite suspicious. Oren McIntyre as well. And of course, I wanted to just preface that, I mean, we've met Oren McIntyre IRL, right? At an event. I like him a lot.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. Great channel. I recommend it. I mean, I do editorial work at Praxarchy. I publish his stuff. So again, I have only positive things to say, but I need
disagreements are intellectual, right?
Yeah. We use him as a sort of example of like how exactly some of this Russian influential work is trying to weave its way into the American dialectic, right? McIntyre is a sort of American isolationism guy, right? His argument.
Are you sharing something on your screen or?
No, I don't. And I could share something. I don't really need to
I'm just
for
saying.
This bit.
Oh, just
here.
in case it was not showing up. Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just stop sharing for this, or can I just leave this one here? The black.
Yeah, that's fine. You
black
can
Africans to just make the point, because I mean, his thing is more in the line of culture war, American isolationism, trying to find effective ways for like the hard right to fight the culture war and win by sort of deconstructing a lot of this. What do you call this constitutionalist worldview, right? I mean, I don't think American isolationism is incoherent in any real sense, because America is actually a very big country that can be self-sustained. It would have been funnier if it was like Luxembourgian isolationism or like Swiss isolationism or something. But the US is actually a country that can function in isolation. I mean, you could say what you want about the international implication of that, but I don't think it's incoherent. The thing is that from like a Russian psyop perspective, this is also something that you want to promote. Essentially, they have only something to gain from promoting as much American isolationism as possible. So, and McIntyre is kind of a high ticket guy at this point. He's made it big. Like he's doing this as a full-time job, and he's working now with Glenn Beck or something at the Blaze. So there's of course this angle that there's going to be a Zionism push from one side towards Aaron McIntyre. That's something that people can see pretty easily, right? So there's going to be a difficulty there trying to arrest some of this kind of Zionism stuff, and we have to keep it more in the theoretical realm for it to be sanitized, so you could have access to these networks. But there's also the attack angle from the Russian side, right? Because you saw it very much on the he put out a video that was called by something like Biden and Putin, two sides of the same oppressive coin. And if you go look at the comment section on that video, you can really see like these Russian troll farms at work. If you want to see what that looks like every comment is going on some type of like all of these narratives that I talked about, like Russia, Putin is the savior of the white race, and he's going to save Christianity, and all this kind of absolutely absurd nonsense. So they have very much the ability, if they think someone is subject to audience capture, for example, that they could just push these kind of push a lot of negative attention at certain videos, like the video he had. It was not an elaborate video. The Biden Putin video was something that he put out after Alexander Navalny died in prison, just making the case that, okay, this is what happens to Russian dissidents, so maybe you shouldn't simp for Putin. And there was very little information about Putin at all, because I don't think he has any interest in a lot of foreign policy things that are sort of outside of the US. It's more internally focused. So it's like, okay, Biden is bad, maybe don't be a Putin simp. And then it's like the comments are just sort of flooded with this kind of, oh, well, you don't understand, blah, blah, blah. And a little bit later that month, he gets on this other guy called Ben Swan to sit and talk about Zelensky, right? And Ben Swan is basically a sort of confirmed Russia shill. So I suspect that there was a kind of, there was some coordination there in trying to get that. I don't know how he arranges these interviews or something, but I would actually suspect that Swan reached out to him to try to, we're going to lose this audience, so we need to just bring in some more pro-Russian perspectives here. And he had, because it came from the angle of basically, I'm an American isolationist, forever wars suck, and Zelensky is coming to the Congress and asking for money, and that's gay. So you can sort of use that to say, okay, well, yeah, I also think Zelensky is gay, and let's just have a talk about how Zelensky is gay, and then using 1 hour of that time to basically just promote pure Russian propaganda for 1 hour, and then not have the host question it at all. And that's essentially what happened in that episode, in my perspective. Like all of these kind of absurdity, standard Russian propaganda things were worked in, and there was just kind of no pushback at it. Because I don't think that I don't get the impression that McIntyre is really interested in that at all. It's sort of, okay, I'm against foreign intervention, and he wants to talk about how Zelensky is
foreign
stupid.
intervention.
Yeah. So essentially, how about them forever wars? And then you just go bit by bit by bit, and then just work in another narrative until you have sold the entire package of Russian priors to the American audience that he has, and it works like a charm. So I don't think that was a coincidence at all. But if you want to just look at how these things work in tandem, I thought that was an interesting example. So let's see.
And to be fair, there's something to be said for, I don't know how the operation is at the Blaze, but McIntyre might not even be the one who is sort of screening the people he talks to anymore. I'm just putting that out there. That's a possibility.
I don't know exactly if they even prioritize that, because I think a lot of this Russian stuff has gone under people's radars.
Maybe.
I mean, this is not even a joke, right? Because we're moving on to a little bit, bigger fish here. like the Judge Napolitano circle. Because I mean, there's been news recently. I think it happened yesterday that Scott Ritter had his passport taken away by the State Department when he was going on a flight to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And of course, this is something that I was always wondering if something like this was going to happen, because I mean, I have this Excel spreadsheet where I've tried to map out these networks of these kind of pro-Russian influencers that are working in the West, working at different angles. And like one of the absolute most active and most just kind of blatant pro-Russian influencers would be Scott Ritter. And Scott Ritter is kind of an ex-American intelligence weapons inspector who has been, because of we'll get into that, but because of various prison sentences, has lost his job, and now he's kind of just working full-time as a Russian propagandist. But it was just kind of weird to me how this guy is sitting in his home in his underpants in Pennsylvania, sitting on Zoom streaming Russian propaganda to like that's being run on Russian internal television, being dubbed over, and
Seriously?
talking to he's being
I didn't know that.
He's actually now a celebrity inside Russia, right? Who's coming on, like what's his name, Vladimir Solovoy, the Jewish Russian TV host who's gonna like their main propaganda guy. He has had Scott Ritter on. He's been on Russia Today. He's just doing every like podcast circuit talking about this stuff. I mean, he was going to the Russian Economic Forum. That's like their version of Davos, essentially. So he's completely embedded in the network circuit for this kind of stuff. And so he's just sitting there in Pennsylvania running this stuff, and nobody's doing anything, especially as the like Ukraine-Russia situation seems to intensify and escalate. You would think that if the CIA is as shrewd as they're made out to be in the right wing, that they would at least pick up on this. I find it just weird how a lot of these people seem to go under the radar. But no, that was not the case. Their assertion was the same as mine, that he is like the main, he's probably like one of the bigger pro-Russia guys. So, I mean, it's interesting because in certain parts of the DR, he's very, very highly esteemed. Essentially, he's taken serious as a geopolitical analyst, and his words, like his predictions, are sort of what's going around, what's going in these discussions that you're seeing on Twitter. I don't know if you have seen it, but it's something that I've noticed. But instead of looking at some of his predictions, I just wanted to share the clip that somebody posted on Twitter. He was on Jimmy Dore recently talking about his prison sentence. Let's see here.
Yeah, there it is.
Are people getting sound?
Probably. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
We got it.
I'm just going to run this clip. I hope it doesn't get taken down. Just so you can get an idea about this Scott Ritter fellow and what kind of person he is.
I went to prison for 3 years as a sex offender. You know what they do to sex offenders in prison, Jimmy? It ain't an easy ride. Guess what happened to me? I went. The guards told me when I came in, "Don't talk about your case." Well, hell, it was all over TV. So I went straight to the gangs. I went to the Crips, the Bloods, and the Latin Kings, the big three that kill sex offenders. And I went up to them and I put all my paperwork on the table and I said, "Read it. If you guys think I'm a sex offender, we'll go out right now and I'll kill about 50 of you before you get me. But if that's what you want to do, let's do it." They read it and they came back and they said, "You're screwed. You got screwed. There's no crime here. In order to get out of prison, you have to take sex offender therapy. But in order to do this, you have to plead guilty." I went to the head and I said, "I'm not pleading guilty. I didn't commit a crime. I'm guilty of nothing." He said, "Well, then you'll never get out on parole." I said, "That's too bad." What I did say is I put the file in front of him and said, "Everything in there I'm guilty of, but none of it is a crime." Guess what happened, Jimmy? I'm the only sex offender ever to be paroled from Pennsylvania State Prison without ever confessing his crime, because even they said you committed no crime. The warden said you committed no crime. The guards said you committed no crime. The judge and the prosecutor who wanted to make a name off of putting me in jail, they said I did. That's the result.
Okay, I mean, I'm seeing some comments on the YouTube video that the prison he was sent to was in fact not maximum security prison. It was like a minimum security prison. Very unlikely
And
to
the
actually
gangbang
have.
we're very interested in reading like a full court document to
Yeah,
prove that this guy
he got the Crips and the Bloods and the Latin gangs to read like a
sit down
50-page,
and pull out their
document.
glasses and read the entire court document, and they all concluded that this man is innocent.
Yeah, the thing is that he's in on like 2 pedophile convictions that were. It's really sort of more of a like a to catch a predator scheme, where it's sort of the cops that were kind of baiting him into it. But he fell for it twice. So
Jesus.
he has very much become sort of a piranha in the West. I think there is a sort of profile.
Pariah, you mean?
A pariah in the West, and there's a certain profile, especially for because now we're moving away from these kind of like Twitter rage bait engagement types who are just sharing clips and getting rage bait on Twitter, and maybe they have a Patreon or some kind of buy me a coffee where like the Russians can send them rubles, unto people like Ritter, who are what I consider very high value propagandists. And this is it's much higher hanging fruits, because these are people who have genuine expertise, who have had like high level jobs, high level education, and a very like a high degree of respect, which is the reason that they do get invited onto various shows and that they're going to sit and argue. But the thing is that, again, I could have like picked up predictions and stuff from Ritter to try to show that it's not that serious, but I think this clip should just sort of suffice in and of itself to just kind of summarize. If you are the type of person who make these type of claims, there is a sort of like, you know about Steven Seagal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's been pulled into kind of the Russian system in the same way. Who's kind of a washed-up actor.
He seems like he's willingly gone into it.
Yeah, and I mean that is the case with a lot of these people. That the profile, especially for these type of expert propagandists, it's very consistent that you have someone who has been a part of a Western institution, whether it would be high-level military, bureaucracy, politics, something like this, and they have a falling out with the institution. Whether in this case, it would have been his own fault, right, with the sex offender charges. But you have somebody else like Douglas McGregor, for example, who. The problem was really more his own kind of unorthodox methods. He
you gotta watch out.
Like someone like McGregor, who's also been very active as a kind of pro-Russia figure, where I think in his case it's really more of he didn't feel like he didn't get the military accolades that he deserved, because he was very much a kind of an unorthodox person, not a yes man, and essentially feeling bitter towards the Western system. The same thing with John Mersheimer, who's part of this circle as well, who released the book The Israel Lobby, right? And that's going to be a big taboo, especially when you're like a Jewish-dominated academia, to put out a book trying to sort of expose the influence on of Israelis, sort of Jewish interest on U.S. politics. So for that reason, has sort of been pushed out and become a bit more of a pariah in the U.S. academia, and then they sort of end up going into the Russian system or being sold in there instead, by either they're getting funding or they're getting the prestige from there, which is, in Ritter's case, it's really more like, I don't know where you go if you have 2 pedophile convictions, but in Russia, he's a celebrity, right? He was going to this kind of St. Petersburg conference with 20,000-30,000 people, where he would be one of the main speakers on the panels.
Right.
He's a big deal over there. Like he's huge, and he's gotten a new lease on life. So that's essentially what he's doing, and why I think they are essentially doing this. The problem is then, as the conflict escalates, how long they're going to be able to do it, especially being inside of the United States. With I was almost surprised that he didn't have Russian residence, to be honest. If it was me, I would have, but I think Americans are a little bit more careless with that. It'll be interesting to see how we go from there.
See where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have anything more? We're coming up on 2 hours here.
We're coming up on 2. Yeah, I wanted to do more
the weekly
talk
Russia
about.
watch is
I
taking.
wanted to do actually more on McGregor and Mersheimer, but maybe if there's interest, that we go back to looking at those two and like the Russian connections they have and some
Are
other
you going
characters.
after Mearsheimer as well? Ooh.
Yep.
It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt.
But yeah, I mean, at least it's just the sort of pet interest thing that I have currently. But we could save it for later, right? Because we're going up on 2 hours. So time flies when you're having fun.
We
Yeah,
already
so-
had the Longhouse, the long house last week, and we're almost having a long house this week. And I think we can save this for next week. And as Nordanon says, my attention span is too short for this. We have to think of the Zoomers.
The problem is that there's
skibidi toilets and
more
and the
skibidi toilets.
kiosks.
But there's just too much content. Like I'm just following every like Russian propaganda account in the universe at this point. There's just way too much. I could just have my own channel where I just sit and like discuss every single narrative that's coming out at this point. It's a funny hobby because I think it's undercovered in our circles. Yeah,
it's good to shine a light on this because whether or not some specific person is actually a Russian op or whatever, I mean, I think just being aware of this has helped me a lot.
Yeah, it's just important to have that piece of the puzzle. Like this is an angle. Like there is an active effort. Russia is a big player on the global stage. They have an agenda, and that agenda is being exercised through certain people. And there is a network there, and there are people who are more susceptible to being a part of that network who have. And this is just something you have to look for if they're repeating these types of talking points. If they are like the type of person who would be, in these networks somehow. I think it does give a little bit more three-dimensionality to what's going on, rather than just labeling everything as Zionist subversion, as I think a lot of people are doing.
Very good. Before we leave, there's a couple of super chats that we didn't get to. The first one is from Florida Man who asks, "Are traps gay?" I think traps are gayer than men.
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah,
you could just be gay, but
the
you
jury,
chose to be
the
even
jury
gayer.
is in on this. The traps are gay, in fact.
Peregrinus de Flandria for €5. That's a euro. Yep. Perfect event for illustrating the problems got spun into antisocial retarded narrative. The state doesn't even need to psyop us. I think this is in regards to the
Manheim
coverage
text, yeah.
on the Manheim stuff. Yeah. Yes, that certainly was. I don't know. It just got weird really fast on Twitter. That's my take. And that's it. That's all the super chats we have. Well, we have one chat here from Mateo Alvarez who says, "Logic Path, why don't you post memes anymore? You used to be my favorite memer on this platform. He's too busy fighting with Putin."
Well, you could follow me. You could get a Twitter account and you could follow me there where I do post more stuff. But
there is more memes there.
The YouTube thing is like I was just kind of reposting things I found on other sites anyway. I get that it's funny. I just I didn't know where to go with YouTube.
There's an opportunity cost, right?
It does take, still if it's like it's short, it's kind of. I don't remember like exactly why. At some point I was like, why am I even doing this? So I get that it's funny, but I think you could find those memes in other places.
Yep.
I mean, with the engagement I got, somebody else could have just picked up that.
Yeah, I mean, why you could literally just run a meme channel and you wouldn't have to do anything else. Probably at this point, you would probably be able to live off of it.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to, I mean, some guy asked me on Twitter about like some of these little dark age edits that I made that have been blocked by YouTube. I just posted it to him, and I mean, if people want to just take my content and repost it or something, they're free to do that if they think they can get some engagement on YouTube, or they want to get enough subscribers to get the community tab up and running so they can post memes themselves.
Peregrine is correct. It was the cringe pig and TikTok compilations that did you in.
Yeah, well, it was funny at least, but I think I ran out of the lowest hanging fruit. And then that's kind of what I'm like. If when it gets a little bit too tough to get the clips, I just get too tired. I didn't want to spend more time doing it, honestly.
No, makes sense though. I mean, it's just stupid memes at the end of the day, right? So, speaking of, I have to check with Burkarl because we might be coming up on the yearly Longhouse meme review. I'll have to check in on that. Maybe that'll be an episode in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
It is time to end the stream. We've been going for 2 hours. Thank you everyone for watching. Luddic Path, anything you want to share before we leave?
No, just the usual. You can follow me on Twitter for my takes and read praxarchy.com.
Very good. Again, I was asked by a friend of the channel, Jay Greenriver, to share a Discord for anyone who is located in Scandinavia. If you're not, this Discord is not for you and you will be kicked. But if you're interested in hanging out and chatting, you can do that here. You can follow me on Twitter as well. I shitpost more than Luddic does. I mostly just retweet stupid stuff these days. But it's a lot of good fun. And that's that. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for listening. And we hope to see you again next week. And have a good weekend. Bye-bye.